So hello and welcome to 6 Steps to a Communication Audit, your prescription for communication and organizational health. My name is Hannah Nava and I will be leading this webinar today. So just a bit about me. I'm a graduate at Full Sail University getting my master's in public relations. I have my social media accounts and LinkedIn listed to the right should you wish to contact me with any further questions. I do have a history of doing public relations with nonprofits such as Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Gary, and Relay for Life of Lake County West. And I have previously helped conduct a communication audit for the South Shore CVA in Hammond. A communication audit is going to be looking at making sure that an organization has open two-way communication. Communication professionals really need to use open two-way communication. Two-way communication is going to lead to a happy and productive work environment and good relations with an organization's publics. So in essence, two-way communication cultivates effective communication. Again, communication professionals should strive to maintain open or two-way communication. This type of communication promotes a healthy work culture and productivity. So some benefits include fostering a supportive environment, encouraging participating efforts among employees, establishing a trusting environment, and creating participation in positive formal and informal communication. Now, closed or one-way communication should be avoided at all costs. Closed communication can create a hostile work environment, which would result in a lack of trust and low morale among employees. It would establish little participative effort and make employees less likely to share information with one another and less likely to want to work within a group setting to achieve a common goal. So Dr. Thomas Roach, PhD, a Purdue University Calumet professor with over 35 years of experience in the PR field, states that according to systems theory, every organization is part of a system with three components: the organization, its publics, and its goals. So the ultimate organizational goal is survival. Now, system theory views each organization like a social environment in that these three components are all connected and always changing. So in order to remain successful, an organization must adjust with the changes. If not, they're going to fail. This graph, we see an organization participating in closed one-way communication. So here we have the organization in the middle with its publics of shareholders, customers, community, and employees. The black arrows are going to represent the flow of communication, which is only going from the organization to its publics. So as you can see, nothing is being received by the organization. This is ideally how organizational communication should work. It's open, two-way communication. So again, the black arrows represent the flow of communication. And now we see that the organization is not only sending messages to its publics, but is receiving information from its publics as well. Receiving information from one's publics is absolutely crucial. It allows the organization to understand the needs of its publics and determine whether or not the messages they are sending are being received by their publics. They can also identify reaction to these messages. And so by receiving feedback, organizations are able to make adjustments, which in line with systems theory will help them adjust and continue to be successful as an organization. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be using a fictional company that I call Cup of Joy to help explain just some of the concepts as we go through. So Cup of Joy is going to be a local coffee house with around 20 employees, and the cafe serves about 200 or so guests per day. Their menu items include coffee and espresso drinks. They sell homemade bakery items, including cookies and pastries. Food items include salads, sandwiches, and a few hot entrees like some soup and pastas. As far as media or advertising goes, Cup of Joy does use social media sites, but only Facebook and Twitter, and they do have a website as well. All right, so now that we've introduced you to our fictional business, let's get on to the brunt of the presentation. So what is a communication audit? An audit is going to be an inspection or an examination. So therefore, a communication audit inspects communication processes. It looks at the effectiveness of communication between an organization and its publics, or those to whom they are trying to communicate. After data is gathered through the communication audit, recommendations are made in order to improve communication practices, as well as highlight effective practices already being employed. Data is gathered through a 4-step process of benchmarking, interviews, focus groups, and surveys. Now, it's important to conduct these steps in order because each step leads to the other. So the previous step is going to establish a foundation for the next step on which that research will be conducted. So looking at this, we have our qualitative data, or data that focuses on the effectiveness of communication. This is going to be gathered through the first 3 steps of benchmarking, interviewing, and focus groups. Our quantitative data is gathered through surveys. The information gathered through surveys is then turned into quantitative data or tangible data that can be shown in charts, numbers, and this is really going to give those to whom you're presenting a more concrete idea of the information that you've found. And it's easier to explain that way as well. All right, so the first step in any communication audit is going to be benchmarking. This is going to be an examination of competitor companies, both direct and exemplary. So a direct company is a company that sells or provides similar products or services. An exemplary company is one that does not necessarily provide similar products or services, but effectively uses open, two-way communication processes. So when looking at these companies, it is important to gather information on both their internal and external publics. Remember that a communication audit is a comprehensive examination of an organization's communication process. Ensuring that the internal communication is healthy is just as important as ensuring that the external public is receiving messages. You may be asking, what's internal? What are external publics? Internal publics are going to be anyone within the organization. So we're going to be looking at employees, upper management, hourly employees, anyone along those lines. For external, it's going to be anyone outside of the company that the company is serving. So we're going to be looking at shareholders, the consumers, they're going to be serving the media as well, and any other public or group along those lines. So when we're looking at Cup of Joy, their direct companies include Starbucks, of which there are several in the area, and again, I'm just going with my hometown area, and a local cafe called Grindhouse and Coffee Cabin, which again are 2 local independent cafes that also do very well on their own. So some exemplary companies for Cup of Joy are going to include Target, Google, and Apple. Now you can choose whichever companies you want to look at. Just try and have a similar number. Maybe you want to look at 20 direct and 20 exemplary. So you have a total of 40 companies that you're benchmarking against your own. Exemplary, we just, again, chose based on top lists for best companies. So you can Google search top 100 companies to look for, top 100 companies with the best communication processes, anything along those lines. Now, when it comes to benchmarking, you need to first identify what you want to find out during the audit. Perhaps you want to examine the social media and whether or not it's effective. What about employee relations? Is there an open door policy at the company? And do employees feel that they can use this? What about direct mailing or employee newsletters, even email listings? You need to create a list and write down the answers for your own company. So do they have an open door policy? Yes, directly state it. Maybe you got it from the employee manual. Do they even have an employee manual? What type of information is listed in here? Is the employee manual available? Did employees receive it when they first were orientated for the company? Do they have it on them? Do they still reference it? Different things like that, just to make sure we're looking at the communication channels and the important information that needs to be expressed not just to the internal publics, but to the external publics. So after you fill that out for your company first, you're then going to create identical lists of the items you need to find and fill out the information for both direct and exemplary companies. So if I were to start creating a benchmark for Cup of Joy, for example, one item would be social media. I would put that they have a Facebook and a Twitter page, each with around 1,000 followers. I would do the same for all other companies, Starbucks, Coffee Cabin, and their respective social media accounts and followers. Once these benchmarks are filled out, I have an idea of the other companies and their practices compared to Cup of Joy. Next step is going to be the interviews. Now, these are personal and one-on-one. They're meant to gather the intimate data and individual perspectives from internal publics, so again, board members and employees, and your external public, so customers or members of the media. Interviews should be randomly conducted, not random in the sense of the time, but in who you choose. And you need to use stratified sampling when doing these. So stratified sampling means dividing participants into relevant groups. All right, so Cup of Joy managers and our employees cannot be grouped together. You need to gather data on the managers and hourly employees separately in order to get the best data possible. These interviews also need to be conducted anonymously, not just for the comfort of the research participants, but because this information will be provided to upper management at the end. When you combine the internal public interviews with the external public interviews, you're going to identify the themes that will lead to your focus groups or that will really help push along the focus group. The focus group is going to be the third step, and these also are going to be gathering information from internal publics and external publics. Participants should be randomly selected and stratified as well. Good focus groups have a minimum of 10 participants, but no more than 14 participants. Focus groups help identify trends and collective thoughts. They are also meant to identify points of conflict and consensus. So unlike the interviews, which are one-on-one, you're really kind of taking the themes that were in the interviews and sort of looking at if a group, like a collective group, agrees with this idea or this opinion, or it does not. After conducting the focus group, similar to the interviews for the focus group, the information gathered will then identify the themes that you're going to be looking for in your survey. So a focus group, if you've never done one or you've never been part of one, it's run by a moderator and generally takes about 90 minutes to 2 hours. A note taker is also present, and the note taker jots down points of conflict and consensus, as well as the dialogue and direct quotes from participants. The dialogue is attributed to respective participants, but in an anonymous fashion, such as labeling them participant 1 or participant A. The moderator helps the conversation by asking initial and probing questions. They do make sure to call out participants, especially those who have maybe been quiet or haven't been speaking up as much, to ensure that all participants have an equal voice and that all individuals are being part of the group. The moderator is also going to verbally identify points of conflict and consensus when they arise. So, for example, you might say something like, so everyone here really kind of feels that Cup of Joy is pretty open with, taking customer feedback. And then, you would look for verbal cues such as nods or even murmurs of yes. Now, when it comes to external focus groups, it may be a bit difficult to get participants. You really need to rely on individuals to show up to your pre-designated meeting time. Many may not show up, which can affect the number of individuals in the group. So it's definitely okay to invite a few more than 14 with the expectation that some will cancel on you. But as long as you kind of have around that 10 number, you'll be fine. Definitely also have an incentive for them to come. So for example, participants could maybe get a $20 or $25 Cup of Joy gift card for participating. Now, the final step in the communication audit is going to be the surveys. Again, these focus on your internal and external publics. Internal and external publics will each get their own survey, though questions may overlap, such as your demographic questions, such as age, income, location. The survey can only be created once benchmarks, interviews, and focus groups have been conducted in that order. Surveys are randomly distributed to the publics. The information is then totaled together and quantified, providing tangible data that can be presented in graphs and shown to the organization. So these surveys should be randomly distributed so everyone has an equal chance of taking a survey. For internal publics, you need to create a list of all the groups of employees. So again, this goes back to your stratification. Then you need to determine how many surveys need to be distributed to get an accurate read. So for example, in a company of 1,000 hourly employees, you should pass out about 300 surveys to hourly employees. And again, it's going to be randomized. So provide each hourly employee with a number and use a random generator, such as randomizer.org, to select the individuals for you and then pass out the surveys to those individuals. In a smaller company like Cup of Joy with only about 20 employees, each employee can be given a survey, and then you can get a 100% read back on the group that you're looking at. Now, for external publics, you want to first identify how you wish to randomly sample. So perhaps you decide that you want to give a survey to every 5th individual that walks into Cup of Joy. By doing this over several days, this gives Cup of Joy customers, both new and returning, a chance to take the survey for you. You can also utilize other public locations, such as festival or other public space, to survey individuals who may have never been to Cup of Joy or never heard of it. Finally, we have your recommendations. Recommendations are a formal presentation to the company of all the findings from the audit. You can opt to even provide a printed audit book of the information or even a PDF version, but all gathered information should be delivered to the organization in some format. This is going to include all information from benchmarks, interviews, focus groups, your surveys, all of your data from all of those, your research methodology, and these recommendations. You're going to be explaining to the organization that implementing these recommendations will lead their company to a better, more open two-way communication. So for example, perhaps through the surveys, I found that many people didn't feel that their opinions were heard. Maybe there's no customer feedback cards, and customers would like to see this. So my recommendation to Couple Joy would be, hey, just have some customer feedback cards. Set those up. It'll give you a chance to connect with some of your customers, and maybe they have some really great ideas that will really help boost your store and make them want to come back more and more. So now some reminders for the communication audit. Having anonymity is absolutely crucial to gathering the best information. You want the participants to be as open with you as possible. If you are conducting an audit for your own organization, this might be a bit more difficult due to the pre-existing relationships that you have with employees. Though it can be costly, having a third party conduct the audit can help ensure that you're gathering the best data. Now, also be sure to stratify to gather appropriate data for specific groups of employees, such as hourly versus salary. These groups may definitely not have the same views. So combining the data for these two groups will skew your data, which will lead to incorrect themes and, even incorrect or not helpful recommendations for the company. Remember that people may get upset during these presentations, especially if the information is indirectly talking about an individual in upper management or, the CEO, CFO, anything along those lines. So for example, employees at Cup of Joe may overwhelmingly feel that a certain manager isn't treating them well. And this, is going to diminish morale because, again, it's that closed one-way communication. But at the same time, they don't feel that they can bring this issue up to the owner of Cup of Joy. So now both the manager and the owner may take this information personally. And another thing to note here with the small number of employees, with there only being 20, anonymity is an issue here. So again, just really strive to go back to that first reminder and try and be as anonymous with people as possible. And finally, an organization can only be provided with these recommendations. Even after all the work is done and all the issues are identified, companies may choose to only adopt certain recommendations or just ignore everything altogether. Again, after all, they are just recommendations, not a force of hand. So again, the best you can do is just really encourage them that these recommendations will lead to better overall organizational health, which in turn could lead to more profits, which a lot of people won't argue with that. So I do hope that you found this webinar useful and informative and gained a bit better of an understanding about how a communication audit can help an organization and what it is. Thank you very much.